The last session of the day, dealing with control. Can I request everyone to please take our seats here? By way of introductions, our session chair is Smriti Subramaniam, a partner at Advaya Legal, a fast-growing full-service commercial law firm based in Bombay. Smriti graduated from National Law School of India, Bangalore in 2001 and joined ITC Limited as an in-house lawyer, where she advised on a range of commercial contracts and new business initiatives. Thereafter, she joined ELP as a senior advocate in the corporate and infrastructure practice. Before joining Advaya, she worked as legal counsel for international oil and gas major BG Group Electric in India. Sumit Chandwani is a managing partner at Earth Capital. He has over 20 years of experience in private equity, structured finance, project finance. Most recently, he served as a board member of ICICI Venture and the president of the private equity business. Sumit led the buyout practice of ICICI Venture and led India's first management buyout with VA Tech Wabag in India's largest water engineering company, and also the first buyout in the manufacturing space of ACE Refractories. Prior to joining ICICI, Sumit worked with ICICI Limited and GE Capital. Sumit has an MBA from IIM Bangalore and a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from IIT Roorkee. Girish Mehta is the CEO of Beams Hospital. Girish leads the hospital chain, a chain of boutique hospitals focused on laparoscopic surgery as platform. Beams currently has 4 setups spread across India and is planning to open at least 3 more in the next 12 months. As CEO, Girish is entrusted with the task of making Beams the leader in this niche area in the next 3 to 5 years. An engineer and an MBA from prime institutes in India, Girish counts himself as a healthcare professional, having worked in the sector for the last 12 years. Before Beams, Girish was leading the Fisher Scientific business belonging to Thermo Fisher Scientific Incorporated. Fisher Scientific is a virtual mall of products, equipment, instruments, chemicals, and consumables. Girish is an alumnus of IIT Mumbai and IIM Kolkata. Nishant Sharma, the co-founder and managing director of Kedara Capital, and he is the managing director at Kedara Capital Advisors. Previously, he served as a principal at General Atlantic, where he focused on investments in healthcare, energy and resources, and business service and technology. Prior to joining GA in 2006, Nishant worked at McKinsey in its Indian office. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, an MTech from the Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, and a BTech in Biochemical Engineering from IIT Delhi. Neeraj Gupta is the managing director of Meru Cabs. A first-generation entrepreneur, he teamed up with India Value Fund to create one of the finest radio taxi services in India under the Meru brand name. Under his guidance, Meru has now become a synonym to radio taxi. His entrepreneurial skills have made Meru the single largest radio cab service in India with a fleet size of more than 3,500 cabs. Mr. Gupta, prior to this venture, set up Mumbai's largest fleet service business, catering to names of some of the finest names in media and outsourced business services. Over to the session chair, Smriti.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. We are the last panel, and thank you for staying back. It's a rev up to the award ceremony and the cocktails after that, so we won't hold you for too long. Lovely long day, and I really thank Venture Intelligence for all the thought that has gone behind it. And I think the topic that we have today for the panel is extremely relevant from what I've seen of the various discussions that have happened during the day. I have a wonderful panel, which again is very well balanced. While we're talking about control deals and we're talking about buyouts, I have 2 promoters with me and I have 2 investors with me. What better can we expect from this panel now? We are talking about control deals and buyouts in an environment where there may not be a significant nature of investment in India currently. But however, this could be a form of working in the future. It is a very popular structure in the Western world. Most of the corporate thrillers are around buyouts. And one often wonders why the buyouts are not so popular in India. And I often understand that it's primarily because the promoters or the businesses are emotive about sharing control. There is also a suggestion that it's because the PE or the VC industry has not come to the same level of maturity as it has come in the Western world. I don't know. Maybe we can find out during this discussion what the challenges are, and let's find out from the people who have done the deals what better way can there be around it. Sumit, of course, has done a significant number of buyouts in India, though they're very rare, but he has had the fortune of doing many of them. And I would probably start with asking him to share a few of his experiences.
Sure. Thanks, Swati. It's good to see a buyout panel in a conference after a long time. I think after when I was at ICICI Venture, we did some of the early buyouts in 2004 and 5. The industry was largely dominated by growth capital in the boom years of 6, 7, 8. And then we obviously saw a lull in 9, 10 in terms of the investments. But I think since the last couple of years, we're seeing, I wouldn't call it a resurgence, but a renewed interest in the whole buyout and control space. We've obviously seen India Value Fund do quite a few deals in the past. We are now seeing Kedara, which is largely a buyout fund, and Arth, where I am, which is also a buyout fund being raised in a relatively tough environment. And I totally agree with Smriti that India remains a challenging market for buyouts for a variety of reasons, and we all know the reasons. But let me share some thoughts in terms of how we are seeing the market changing, though gradually. But we are seeing signs of change in how promoters look at their business. So we're seeing a lot of mid-sized promoters who have built a business largely on their drive and passion, now struggling to scale up beyond $25, $30 million revenues. A lot of them have succession issues. We're also finding that a lot of the promoters had dreams of doing an IPO or doing a private equity round, and they're finding that a big hurdle. My own sense is doing an IPO will remain tough, and it'll increasingly become tougher for mid-sized companies because large institutional investors look for businesses of at least $500 million market cap. And we're also seeing that a different behavior pattern between family-owned businesses and entrepreneur-led or first-generation entrepreneur-led businesses. I think family businesses have a strong support system within the family of both capital and management support, whereas most first-generation entrepreneurs tend to be largely lonely at the top. So we are finding very interesting conversations with a lot of these entrepreneurs of either partnering them, where we take a majority and they keep a minority stake, but they continue to remain engaged in the business. We bring in a new management team to scale up that business. And we are just having many more conversations now than we would have had a few years ago, and partly that's because of market conditions, or I think a lot of companies are also finding, given the fact that the growth has slowed down, they're finding it difficult to go back to the growth path of 25-30% growth year on year. And I think the good news is that there is now more capital looking to do these deals, and sometimes it's a bit of a catch-22. I don't know whether deals have to be there first or capital has to be there first. At least now there are more funds looking for such deals, and we hope that we'll see more deals in the near to midterm.
Neeraj, you yourself have had an experience of working with a PE backing you now. Can you just help us understand what have your been expectations out of a PE? Advantages, disadvantages, what you would feel would be there for most entrepreneurs, not just from your own experience, but you think would be applicable for all?
Well, when a PE decides to invest in a company, I think it is very, depends on a lot of factors before the PE should think of basically getting into a company. So it could be the timing, it's the industry which is trying to get into. If the factors are not taken into consideration at the time of investing in a company, that is it a company which we could be able to control or able to manage? Is it a new company, it's a new industry? Would we be able to get a professional management team to run similar businesses? There are a lot of questions that need to be answered by a buyout fund before they think of getting into an industry like so for instance, an industry like Meru, it's a startup company, it's a startup industry. There are no parallels to this company in the past where you can say that, okay, there are experienced people who have been managing such kind of businesses in India. The promoter would typically bring in his expertise, his experience into the business and be able to run such a business in a much more efficient manner, at least in the startup phase. So I think the business typically need to be broken up into three parts. It's a startup growth and probably a stable stage. And buyout funds should be looking at companies which are more stable, which have crossed a threshold where they have established their basic systems, processes, and they're looking at growing beyond a certain level. So I think the understanding of the business, what industry, what segment they're getting into, at what stage they're getting to, I think these are the two important criteria about one should consider before looking at such investments.
Girish, what's your view? I mean, today, if you were to look at the investor community, do you think they would meet your expectations, or they would meet an entrepreneur's expectation of the support that you look for, which is in terms of either professional management or giving access to networks? Is that the way it works in India today? Do you see it going that way in the near future?
I think I would share my experiences when I was building up Piramal Diagnostic Services, and I think lots of things have changed from 2002 when I started building that business. At that point of time, most of the promoters were actually looking for money only. They said they just wanted money and they just wanted to manage the show the way it was. I think the last 10 years I have seen that most of the promoters have reconciled to the fact that they would have to give up control. But I think it's still a huge amount of challenge for most of the entrepreneurs to kind of give up control when they when they give the majority stake to an outside investor, particularly PE. At the same point of time, I also see most of the private equity funds in India still are not very comfortable taking majority stakes. Precisely from the point of view that because the PE industry is relatively kind of in the stage of evolution. So if you see the first phase where they found out lots of investment opportunity in listed company, which were kind of low-hanging fruits for them. And most of those fruits have been plucked, and I think maybe some more lying around there. The next stage was there then when they saw opportunities where they could be able to take these opportunities to a kind of level where they can do an IPO. But these opportunities are now also becoming rarer. So the next opportunity for the PE funds is where they can add maximum value and get disproportionate returns is to have a say in the management. For that, they have to necessarily take majority stakes. And of course, kind of work with entrepreneurs to ensure that while they get the experience and they leverage the experience as well as the skills of the entrepreneur, at the same point of time, supplement it with professional inputs, because as Sumit has said, at some point of time, most of these entrepreneur-driven business refuse to grow because they have reached a kind of management bandwidth limit. You have to bring fresh blood in, you have to bring fresh thinking in, and you have to grow it. We have been seeing that there are challenges over that phase where the entrepreneur has to move from kind of running the business on day-to-day basis to kind of being a guiding light and leave the professional management to professionals. We are reaching that stage, and I think as we move forward, most of the private equity funds, when they start taking interest and taking majority stake, as we see in most of the developed countries like US, UK, or somewhere else, you will find lots of PE funds are buying not only unlisted companies, but listed companies, and with help of existing management or new management, add tremendous amount of value and get multiples of value generated out of it. Because these are the markets which are mature market, and you will able to generate value only by doing significant amount of management skills management over there. I see that happening here also. Perhaps we are not right at that cusp, but maybe going forward in next 3 to 5 years, I would see many more such deals happening.
Nishant, anything that you?
Well, I think I'd concur with what everyone has said here. I think there are a lot of elements which are right. If you look at it from the supply side perspective, which is private equity firms which have the ability to do buyouts. I mean, the reason why we're talking about buyouts is that there is a small niche of companies, of entrepreneurs who are willing to cede control to people who have the capability to run the business, share the passion for the business. Many a times, I think most of us end up being perceived as financial and investing whizzes and not really have the same passion for the business that a founder or an entrepreneur has. And sometimes blending that operating sort of knowledge with investing knowledge in a firm helps you sort of build those capabilities to really serve that market a lot better. So I think that's important. Most firms in India historically, by India being a growth market, haven't focused on that. And therefore, there have always been, what you were talking earlier, Smriti, trust deficits, capability issues. Your ability to have a conversation with someone who's run a business for 20 years is seriously impaired if you don't have experience of running that business and you're just opining on it, from a distance. With people who actually run that business sitting next to you and having a more credible conversation, it's a lot more, sort of open. And that's where I think it's headed. It will not happen in a jiffy. It will take time, like anything else. But I think that momentum seems to be moving in terms of focused investors looking at sort of specific opportunity sets and buyout. So that's what I'd say in terms of how the opportunity set is moving, at least.
Interesting that Girish mentioned that it is not about, mostly it's a majority stake, which is being not really what people are looking for. It's minority stake, but at the same time seeking control. In your experience, what kind of controls would be aspirational for a fund like yours, or any other fund for that matter? Would that be in the form of board seats, affirmative votes, and how effective do you think these contractual rights are in India, especially where maybe people don't have so much respect for those documents that they lock in to the shelves after they sign?
Yeah. Well, again, a very good question, Priti. I think I don't think we can wish away all the contractual documents. I think they're a necessity, they're important, but you can't rely on them in cases when you actually need them. So I think ultimately the trust element has to be built from scratch. In most cases, I think, again, what's happened historically in India is, the start to finish timeline for a transaction has been relatively short. And typically it ends up being like a courting period when everyone's at their best behavior. So for you to judge either an investor or an entrepreneur, it's very, very difficult. So ideally, I think, again, this is an ideal world, and I'm trying to sort of make it as practical as possible, but you would want to observe a company, an entrepreneur, over a period of time, which is why this business is all about experience and having seen many companies multiple times over. You build that relationship over a period of time, and that ends up being the biggest control that you can use eventually. I think you can have all the rights in the world, you can have all the sort of safeguards in place, but if you don't have a collaborative relationship, which you talk about upfront, I think it's equally important to have, sort of good conversation at the same time, have some tough conversations, in a business saying, look, we think you should not be opening a center here. It doesn't make sense commercially. You may have taken certain decisions in the past, but let's together agree on a framework based on which we will expand going forward. And as long as it's a logical discussion, I think most people understand. But you have to do a lot of work upfront. The short fuse to closing a transaction and then doing all these things later is a recipe for disaster, in my view. So that's, I think, something, the more you can upfront, the more you can load it upfront, the better the relationship will be in the future. Because tough conversations are equally important than soft conversations. And that's what hasn't happened as much of in the buyout industry in India, at least in my view.
Girish, what about you? You're of the same view on that?
I would say, I would agree with him that the tough conversations are very key around there, specifically if you really want to manage a relationship as difficult and challenging as between an investor as well as a promoter. I have got several experiences, and when I was doing Piramal Diagnostic Services, where I was working on behalf of J. Piramal, we actually acquired close to around 30 practices in pathology laboratories, and we built them around there. And most of the conversations at that point of time between the doctor who was selling his practice and we were that, what will happen to me post you have acquired? Will I become an employee, or will I continue to control or continue to have some amount of rights in the managing kind of a thing? So the entire conversation has to be managed in such a way that while we get the appropriate control over the function, at the same point of time, the doctor doesn't feel left out. So that's the way that balance has to be, and I think that's something which is applicable for each and every industry, whether it's a medical services industry or whether it's any other product or service business. So I think that balance is extremely key, and I would entirely concur with it. And many a times there are situations where you really cannot soft pedal them. You have to have a very tough conversation where you have to see that, okay, these are your areas, these are my areas. And as much you can front load them, as much better. So as we progress from 2002 onwards till 2006, in which we did close to around 25 acquisition, the entire term sheets character changed accordingly. We learned from the experience, and we learned that if you can front load all your expectations from the acquiree and convince him on that, is that much better, because then the relationship becomes that much easier. You know exactly what to expect out of him, and he knows exactly what he will get out of you. And then, of course, the entire issue of integrating the thing and everything around that. Because, see, if coming back to the fund, if the fund is saying that, okay, I have got majority stake and we would like to run it the way we want it, that conversation has to be upfront. You cannot really do it. That, okay, we will only tell good things now and later on we would like to, then it doesn't happen. You have to have that conversation right before the acquisition, and within the 3-4 months of acquisition, you should set everything, the framework right. Things will move much smoother that way. I'm not saying that there are not going to be challenges moving forward, but they'll be much lesser. And the entire team will be able to focus that much better. We should not, at the same point of time, doing away with the entrepreneur is absolutely a no-no, because the person has got the passion. He has got the skills. He has brought up the business. And by utilizing and infusing those things with the skills which the PE brings in or the outside management brings in, one can really work wonders. In fact, we could be able to, I mean, we were able to grow most of these businesses by 30-40% every year organically after we grew, because the doctors post-acquisition were still ready to work the way they worked always, because otherwise they had no incentive to work. If they were left just like that as an employee, they had no incentive or no passion to do it. But you have to constantly get them involved, and that's a very delicate balance. I mean, we cannot express it in terms of a kind of a paper or so. It's a more of a human relationship which has been managed.
Sure. Returns on investment is always a driver of decisions. Unfortunately, people see exits as a fallout of conflicts as well. What's your view on exits, and where do you see, of course, people have been saying in the previous conversations on this table as well, that IPO does not look very attractive in this market. It may not look attractive even in the next 1 or 2 years. In such a scenario, where do you see PEs exiting, mostly from startup businesses or even growth stage businesses?
Sure.
And do you also agree whether exits are a good way to end as an exit route from even the conflict situation?
Sure. So look, I think the advantage with buyouts is that you have control over the asset and you can choose when and how to exit. And let me illustrate that by some of my past experiences. So in case of Ace Refractories, which was a very industrial business, we were very clear from day one that we would sell this to a foreign strategic. And we started making efforts towards that from the day we acquired the business. So we were very clear. We knew this was a cyclical business, and this would could through a down cycle within a 4-5 year period. So we were very clear that, look, we probably would like to exit this in a 3-4 year time frame. And we were successfully able to do that. In case of Viatec, again, it was a engineering business, but post our acquisition, we were able to build that business out pretty aggressively. And by the time we were ready to think about an exit, I think water had become a hot industry. And again, we kind of planned our exit over a 4-year period, decided to do an IPO, and gradually brought our stake down below the management team just before the IPO. Which meant that we didn't have any lockups, we didn't have any IPO lockups, and we were able to sell rest of our stake post the IPO. So I think in our mind, buyout addresses the whole issue of exit, because in a lot of growth capital situations, the biggest conflict between the entrepreneur and the private equity fund is really the horizon of investment they have. So an entrepreneur has a infinite time horizon, whereas a private equity fund has a 5 or a 7-year time horizon. And given the capital market cycles, and we are seeing that the capital markets are becoming more volatile, the windows of opportunity to an IPO are becoming shorter and shorter, and in a lot of cases, the promoter doesn't want to sell equity at a low price, and that's why we are seeing that none of the IPOs have happened, and private equity investors haven't got their exit. So in a lot of those situations, we are finding that there are several secondary deals happening where one private equity is buying from another private equity investor, and that's becoming probably the largest source of exits in the entire. That's happened in the U.S. We are now seeing that in India as well. So our belief remains that if you buy businesses that you think you can manage well and grow at a reasonable pace, it need not be a 50% growth per annum. We are happy to buy businesses which are steady, stable businesses where execution challenges are few and far between, and where we think we can manage those businesses with the professional management team. And in those businesses, you can hold them for 7 years, you can hold them for 10 years, and as long as you have control and you are doing well. And in the US, we've seen what is called dividend recaps, where people borrow and pay dividends to equity shareholders. We've seen equity buybacks. So they become a strong source of exits as well for private equity investors, and you don't necessarily have to sell to a strategic, or you don't necessarily have to do an IPO. You can take cash flows out, again in select businesses where the business itself doesn't need a lot of investment. And you can be smart about exiting in phases over the horizon of the investment. And that you can do only when you have control.
Nishant, would love to have your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think Sumit has covered most of it, to be honest, and I concur with him entirely in terms of why buyouts give you degrees of freedom which you need from an exit perspective. I think he's talked about the different routes of exit, so there's no point in belaboring that. What I would say is, I think historically, or even more recently, I think the exit environment has been challenged in India. Everyone knows about that. Buyouts offer a solution to that because you have the option to exit through multiple routes. Having said that, I think historically a lot of firms haven't necessarily done as much work on the exit side right at the time of investing. I think exits have been taken for granted, when investments have been made 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's an area where, a lot more effort has to go in terms of, even as buyout funds in particular, whether it's a strategic exit or a listing or a trade sale to a financial buyer. I think it's important to have those conversations right at the time of acquiring a company, saying, can we list down maybe a couple of strategics who would be interested? So have conversations with the M&A and BD guys at those respective potential acquirers, and try and build some sort of an analysis around exit, which at least I, in my experience, haven't seen as much of, which I think then gives you the confidence that, look, we have, potentially 5 different routes to explore 5 years down the line, versus maybe just relying on whether the capital markets are open at that point in time or not. which then obviously restricts your freedom significantly. But I think the fundamental point is that because of the controlling element of buyouts, you have that flexibility to be able to, go down a path that is available at that point in time and not really relying on externalities as such.
Corporate governance has been the other concern that I've heard a lot of people talk about today. Interesting fallouts, like maybe in the case of Lilliput, where you've had whistleblowing, an understood misappropriation of funds, the investor walking out, and so on and so forth. And of course, that has resonated in many conversations which we have seen today during panel discussions. I'd want Neeraj to probably just help us understand, do you see an investor helping you to build better governance structures? Do you see that as a value add from your investors?
Personally, I think in fact, that's a great value add that corporate governance has brought into the companies. Because when you are running a business individually, you're typically not aware of what are the things you need to do which are important for you to scale the business. If I were to talk about myself, when I was running the company myself, I didn't know, okay, these were the certain audits and these are certain large organizations that you could hire to bring in systems and processes. And those value adds bring in a lot of control on the business. You are able to focus on the important things. Because I think corporate governance is a must which every entrepreneur should really promote and look at as a value add for the company and not look at as a hindrance for growing the business. So in fact, that is something which I was really not aware of, and I personally feel that corporate governance piece of what the private equity firm brings in is a big strength of this. Big understanding the best practices, global best practices that are written are something that really puts the business together.
Girish, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I would entirely agree with Neeraj over there. Some of these institutions, I would say, are very, very key for systematic running of the business, because you never know what's happening in the parts of the business which you can't oversee on day-to-day basis. When you are an entrepreneur, you want to be everywhere, and perhaps you can't reach. And there are, of course, issues where as an entrepreneur, you run your business, you actually take lots of decisions very quickly. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong, and you are entirely responsible for it. But once you have got a corporatized organization with outside investors, it's necessary that corporate governance gives everybody a very transparent as well as fair view of the business. And from that point of view, putting up these systems are extremely important. When we were building, again, I would share my experience. We had some of these incidents when I was building Piramal Diagnostic Services, and we actually kind of replicated the systems which we had in our listed organization, Nicholas Piramal, at that point of time. And some of these audits actually pulled out some of these issues, and we appointed outside auditors, and we were able to kind of sort them out in a very proper way. So I believe as the organization grows, as the business grows, when it becomes from entrepreneurial to corporate kind of a system, all these things have to go along with it. They're absolute necessary, and once, of course, they would prepare you to face the IPO situation in a far better way than, of course, if you don't have those systems. So I think they're absolutely necessary.
Do you think adding corporate governance systems adds also to the share value or equity value of the company over a period of time? Like he was saying, it's fantastic to have good governance systems when you are dressing up the company maybe for an IPO.
Yeah, I think so. I think it definitely does. I think it's a natural evolution in the growth of a company which has largely been either family run or run by a single entrepreneur. I think it's important to take the next step, which is professionalizing the team, or expanding management bandwidth, or really getting independent directors on the board, or just to what Girish and Neeraj said, which was very, I think, heartening to sort of hear. Enhancing corporate governance, overall. And I think if you look at some of the larger companies in India which have had a very strong track record of corporate governance, they've gotten a better value because of that, because investors have been comfortable with the transparency, with the way the management gives guidance, the way they sort of, talk about business drivers, all of that eventually, ultimately only enhances confidence. And confidence is what drives, as an investor, you to invest in a particular company versus another where it's a complete sort of, black box. So it does matter. I don't think you can pinpoint, what that sort of delta is, but I think empirically you can see the difference between a company where corporate governance, is not at the same level, and that sort of, reflects in the valuation eventually.
Sure. So, do you think buyouts is the way for tomorrow? If yes, are there any sectors that you think it'll be more active in?
So, that's a tough question. So India would still, and that's true for Asia, it's not India. I think Asians across the board are more emotional towards their businesses. Owning a business represents a certain social standing. It's not only about money. So I think India will still be dominated by growth capital. And as we know that, we all know how tough it is to run and manage businesses in India. And in a lot of these businesses, we truly believe that there are certain businesses which are best run by an entrepreneur, and we wouldn't want to go near those businesses. So any business that has huge ramp up or huge execution challenges where you're going from one geography and you're going pan-India, or there are businesses where you have a lot of regulation, whether it is infrastructure or business like education, where we feel regulations can come and hit you from anywhere. So we truly believe that those businesses are best run by an entrepreneur, and they would require growth capital. So I think there is always going to be a place for growth capital minority investors in India. So in terms of buyouts, we feel the biggest challenge that we see is not really deal flow. I think our biggest challenge is finding the right managers who have an entrepreneurial streak in them. I think that, in my mind, is the biggest challenge, because our approach towards buyouts is really hiring a top-notch talent at the company level, and then supporting him. And I kind of agree with Neeraj on that. Our approach is, look, once we agree on a strategic plan, we would have a monthly review meeting, but we would largely leave these decisions to the management team to decide on a day-to-day basis. They run the show. So we need managers who can run and manage businesses in the Indian context, because no business in India can be run by a professional manager who doesn't have the entrepreneurial streak or the passion or the drive in him. So in that sense, we are very focused on the sectors that we work in. So we largely work in pharmaceutical businesses. We like engineering businesses, and we like niche manufacturing businesses that tend to have higher gross margins and EBITDA margins. And we believe that these three businesses are where, these three kind of businesses are where we've done a lot of work in the past. We have deep relationships in these sectors. We know a lot of good managers who are keen to work with us. And in a lot of the transactions that we're currently working on, we are actually approaching the deal through a professional CEO who wants to now become an entrepreneur and have a significant stake in the business. And we're kind of jointly working on looking at opportunities together so that he's involved in the business from day one, rather than us buying a business and then bringing somebody on board, because then he doesn't share the same passion for that business as you do. So I think in that sense, it kind of limits the kind of industries we want to play in. But as I said, the last thing we want to do is get into a business and then figure out what we want to do with it. I think that's a situation we'd stay away from.
Just as a closing thought, I think I'll just do a round with all of you, just asking you the Indian way of doing business, the much talked about. I just want each one of you to just give your thoughts about what that means to you and what that means specifically in a buyout context. Neeraj, I'll start with you.
Well, I think traditionally Indian businessmen are either they have inherited a business from their parents or they have built it up from the scratch. They completely connect to the business. They feel that business is owned by them. Can't imagine being away or out of that business. Now we are telling that guy that, look, we are coming in. You have to now take a minority shareholding. I think that is going to be still some time where, as Sumit rightly said, there are probably some few sectors or some industries that people, buyout funds can get into, but largely most of the entrepreneurs would not be wanting to give away the majority shareholding. Secondly, even if the exit perspective is okay, I don't think so buyout funds would have an easy exit route, because listing a company and then having that lock-in period that a buyout fund would have to go through, that also is going to be some kind of a limitation that will be set for them. Secondly, Indian investors, the sentiments are that we want to see the face of the company. We want to see the owner of the company. And probably for the West, it holds true where private equity fund companies are listed and they are managed, but I think India still has some time for that, and I think another 10-15 years is what we should look at before people are okay with professionally managed companies and they don't want really one large public figure or a name to be associated with the company. So I think buyout funds probably some few sectors, but not largely.
Yeah. No, I think in my view, I mean, I sort of partially agree with Neeraj here, but I think in the traditional buyout model in the West won't work in India, where you take 100% on day one and, sort of the entrepreneur, the promoter goes and, you run the business. I think it'll have to be an Indianized sort of buyout model where whether it's a creeping sort of majority acquisition or maybe 51% to start with, where there's a clear governance framework in place. Obviously, you can't hardwire anything. You have to be prepared to deal with sort of issues which happen on a as they happen basis. But I think it's important to recognize that the seller and the buyer, in case of a buyout, will have to be, partners in terms of driving the business forward, unlike it happens in the West where, you just take 100% and run with that going forward. Because there is that level of emotive attachment, there's also a lot of value from a buyer's perspective of having a committed, a passionate entrepreneur involved in the right manner. And we've discussed that in the context of different industries. In healthcare, for instance, Girish talked about how successfully they've integrated acquisitions. But a doctor, as an example, who's more passionate about the clinical side of things than the commercial side of things, there clearly can be a very complementary, synergistic partnership which can be forged between an investor and a doctor, where the doctor focuses on clinical aspects, and making sure the quality of care is not compromised, and the investor focuses on the operations and the commercial side of things. So I think there will have to be a very clear partnership in my view, which will drive the business forward, and that's how it will be in the Indian context. At least that's my view.
I think Neeraj and Nishant, they have said most of the things, but I would like to reiterate around here that there has to be a balance between both the things going forward. Going forward, as I see, maybe 100% buyout and then running the company with professionals is still a little far away in Indian the context. Not because that PEs don't want to do it, but I think they face an acute crunch of talent over there to run the companies they have acquired. Because the PE industry itself in India, as I said earlier, is evolving, and I think it's moving away from purely listed company investment to now unlisted company and then not selling through IPO. So it has got its own challenges around there. It has to get acquainted with that. In Indian context also, most of the entrepreneurs, as Neeraj has shared, are still not in the mind frame to give complete control. So you have to find a balance around there. So in the future, as I see, most of the acquisition, while it will be easier to acquire majority stake, but I think to grow those companies and grow them profitably would require a synergistic and symbiotic relationship between entrepreneur as well as the investor.
Yeah, I think the Indian model would be unique, like everything else we do in India, which is in every industry we have a unique model. So I think in the Indian buyout model would be unique as well. So in our mind, we don't see large buyouts happening. I'm sure you guys have read recently that Dell is going private and it's a $24 billion buyout. I don't think India will, at least in the near to mid-term, will see large buyouts, because if a large company has to sell itself, which we saw with a Ranbaxy or a Piramal, I think they want the highest valuation, and obviously there is somebody out there who's willing to pay top dollar valuation, which obviously doesn't work for a private equity investor. So I think most of the action would really be in the mid-size segment, where our view is that private equity investors and buyout funds have a very important role to play. Because when we talk to foreign strategics, a lot of them tell us that, look, we'd love to buy businesses in India, but we can't find enough businesses of good quality. So by that, what I mean is that there are a lot of these mid-sized businesses, anywhere between 100 crore to 500 crore turnover, where they are largely promoter run. The corporate governance is always suspect, because the promoter doesn't really distinguish himself between himself and the company. They're one and the same. He's the manager, he's the owner, and that's how he runs it. And there are a lot of related party transactions. So obviously those companies can never go through a scrutiny of a proper due diligence. So I think investors like us who are very Indian in our approach, and we understand how an entrepreneur builds a business, what it takes then to scale it up, both from a management perspective, also from a corporate governance perspective, and take it to a level where a foreign strategic feels comfortable. So I think we see ourselves as a bridge between these mid-sized businesses and take them to a size which is, say, maybe a 500 crore or 1,000 crore business with a professional management team. Because a foreign strategic, when they look at an entrepreneur-run business, they say, look, if we buy this guy out, who's going to run the business? And that's where I think people like us have a role to play, where we understand the sensitivities in these businesses. We understand, as Girish very rightly pointed out, the whole dynamics of, how much should you intervene, how much should you let the entrepreneur or the manager run the show. I think that's a very sensitive area which only comes with maturity and only comes with experience, where you know how to set the right balance. And I think that's where we believe, I think there's an important role for people like us, and I think we believe we can make a difference in that space.
Thank you. So I think we're almost about running out of time, but I just want to quickly summarize what I heard today, and I think it's fantastic. It's a fantastic learning for me. What I'm hearing today is that buyouts may be nascent today, but clearly something to look forward to. Buyouts not in the same way as we have seen being done in the Western world, but our own buyout, the Indian buyout with a little bit of tarka. We are also looking at Ps working a bit differently from what we have already seen. They're not only the money tickets, but they are going to be your partners. We're seeing promoters working differently, not holding on to their controls, but willing to share their controls. We're looking at buyouts also offering as an option to investors to actually redeem their returns in the right way. So obviously it seems to be creating a path for another way of investments in India going forward. But we of course have to see how it all pans out, and we look forward to that. Thank you so much for the panel members. It's been fantastic talking to you all. It's the time to ask questions, and please feel free to go ahead.
Any questions? We'll have time, I think, for 2 questions.
This question is to Mr. Nishant.
Yeah.
Just if you could summarize on what is the portfolio of investments that you look at in general, your Kedara
Sorry,
Capital.
could you speak up a little bit? I can't hear.
Portfolio of investments that Kedara Capital looks at.
That Kedara will look at, or? Okay, sure. I think In terms of the portfolio of investments, if you step back for a minute just to give you a bit of background on the firm, we're a fund which has started only about a year ago. We've been fortunate that, we've been able to get to, our target milestones in terms of fundraising, but we're clearly still in the process of fundraising. So till that is done, I can't sort of comment broadly on the fundraising process. But I think in terms of what we'll be looking at from a portfolio standpoint, we'll be looking at both control and non-control transactions. I think control will be an area which we'll be spending a lot of time on, and we've built a team which combines both sort of folks who have strong investing experience and strong operating experience, which is what I was referring to early on in the panel discussion, that it's important to have that balance, to be able to have credible conversations with equally passionate and involved founders and entrepreneurs who run those businesses for several years. So focus in terms of type of transactions will be both control and non-control. In terms of sectors, we will have a focus, again, largely healthcare, consumer, financial services, and business services predominantly. In terms of check sizes, it will be between $25 and $75 million sort of equity checks, but we could do larger through potential co-investors. So that's sort of broadly the I don't know if that answers your question.
My name is Alok Gupta from Gurgan Capital. I have a question for Sumit and for Nishant. To what extent are the cash flows of your target companies important in acquisitions or buyouts specifically? And have they played a role in the past, and how do you see them playing a role in future?
Cash flows of?
Have they played a role in the past buyouts which you have done, and how do you see them playing out in future?
So look, we've for us, cash flows play a very important role because a lot of the deals that I did in the past and some of the deals that we are working on right now are we are looking to leverage those deals. So we look for companies with strong cash flows. And again, just to give you an example from the past, the Ace Refractory business that we bought had 10 million EBITDA when we bought it. And when we sold it, it was a $14 million EBITDA. It wasn't, an EBITDA that scaled up a lot, during our investment horizon. But we were able to generate returns through a great structure which we used, where we could put a decent amount of leverage into the business, and we did the right things from a strategic perspective to make it attractive. From a foreign strategic perspective, and we were able to get a multiple expansion. So, our belief is that there are enough businesses in India. Market is large, and there are those opportunities where you will find businesses with good cash flows, which businesses you can leverage, and without taking a whole lot of risk. I think what we see is that I think private equity investors in India take a lot of risks, which we are not comfortable with those risks. People take risks of projections that go up like a hockey stick. They take risk on the entrepreneur. They take risk on the capital markets. So the way we approach some of these deals, we believe you can generate private equity type returns without taking a lot of those risks.
And I'd concur, Alok, with what Sumit said. I think cash flows are very important, frankly, for even growth capital transactions as much as buyout transactions. I think buyout transaction probably becomes a lot more important because, you want to make sure that in terms of, return on equity, return on capital, you're sort of generating a certain threshold sort of return, which allows you to redeploy the cash that's being generated by the business productively. And therefore, I think from our perspective, it's extremely important to look at the stability of the cash flows, the ability for the business to fund itself using largely internal accruals, the EBITDA to free cash flow conversion, all of those metrics which I think many of us look at. Because that gives you a lot of freedom and margin to play with when you're trying to sort of play with different levers, whether it's to accelerate revenue growth, drive margin enhancement, improve sort of CapEx return, whatever, you know, so all of those things are ultimately a function of what the inherent cash flows of the business are, which is, you know, which is something we look at very, very closely.
Just a quick follow-up is that, I mean, really the Indian banking system doesn't support too much of leveraging. So how do you structure that in your transactions to get the maximum mileage?
So that's a trade secret, Alok. So we can. So I think you know, we believe there are structures available that you can use to leverage deals, and I think in addition to the banks, you now have a lot of non-bank finance companies as well who are looking to do leverage financing. They tend to be more expensive, so you can use that as a bridge and then move to bank financing over a period of time. So I think today, at least our experience is there is leverage available, provided you structure the deal right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, again, not much more I should add there, to be honest, because Sumit's covered it. But I think there is the ability to do post-acquisition capital structure optimization. You don't also want to, you know, over-lever the company, you know, just to juice up your equity returns. So it has to be a fine balance. But I think once you've made the acquisition, you've done an analysis of what the business can support in terms of a sustainable debt to EBITDA, interest coverage, and things of that nature. I think there is ability to sort of optimize the capital structure such that, you know, you can juice up the equity returns to a certain extent. So, you know, that's at least how I would put it.
I'm Neeraj Jain from Deutsche Bank. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel for their views. My question is very concise. How do you see the talent pool of top-level managers and mid-level managers which is required in a buyout, the scene changing in India in the coming few years?
I think it's to everyone. Yeah. In general, just the pool of, maybe, did you want to go first?
I think the talent pool is going to grow, definitely, but say there are certain areas where there is a sufficient amount of talent is available. As Sumit has talked about, he has been focusing in certain areas like engineering and pharmaceutical, which are quite mature industries in India. You have got sufficient number of people. Say when I talk about healthcare delivery specifically, you find an acute crunch of people at the higher levels. You don't find good managers around there. You don't have sufficiently experienced people, precisely because the corporatization of this industry has become pretty late. In fact, it was still largely unorganized industry with lots of doctors running the businesses. The same thing must be true of many other businesses, specifically if I talk about the Neeraj's business also, which is the transportation side, specifically passenger transportation. You will not find much of organization around there. So finding out, I think, good managers must be a big challenge over there too. So it varies from industry to industry, according to me. Somewhere it's much easier, like what Sumit has pointed out. Somewhere it's perhaps much more challenging, as in my industry.
Yeah. Well, I think just to add to what Girish said, and I think I agree with him, if you look at, you know, people who have a proven track record, that's a very limited set. So I think you have to sort of look at different pools of people and be willing to, you know, take a bet on someone also. I think there is clearly a bottleneck in terms of sort of finding ready talent which has got, you know, a credible track record of having scaled businesses, run businesses profitably. So you have to go beyond that. Also, to Girish's point, look at different industries, you know, in a different way. Also, what size of businesses are we targeting here? I think Sumit mentioned earlier, we're really talking about middle market businesses. You know, so in terms of when we look for, you know, managers to run these businesses, whether it's the CEO or any other CXO position, frankly, I think the idea is to look at comparable businesses, business heads, you know, folks who run assets or smaller divisions, not necessarily people who've been CEOs or, you know, CFOs in their past life, you know. So it'll have to involve a lot of talent creation in itself. I don't think the talent is readily available to be picked. That's one of the challenges, frankly, for this to scale up in a manner that we'd like it to scale. But that's an opportunity as well, because then it really boils down to leveraging your networks and, people you've known over years, and sort of giving them that opportunity to sort of run a business. So I think that's what I would say.
So I think from our perspective, we're finding more managers willing to take risks. I think that number is increasing, and I think that's a great thing, because I think people want to get out of the comfort zone and they want to try different things. And I think we are finding that people are more open to the idea of working with an equity stake and working with a fund like ours. I think that's very important for the growth of the industry as well, because without the right managers, you're not able to scale up a lot of these businesses. So we are having some very interesting conversations with people who are in very secure jobs and are now willing to move out and take risks, and a lot of them are even willing to invest along with us and risk their capital in order for them to work alongside a private equity fund.
Well, I have one view here is that due to private equity funds coming in, I think people are really looking at a huge jump in the salaries, and they look at, okay, this is a quick way of increase in salary.
Sure.
I think the orientation and the training piece of how they should get aligned to that business or to that industry that they got into, or that company that they're getting into, is something which is missing. So people do take jumps for higher salaries, but then coming in, and then the private equity expectations are very high. They want people to outperform. They want people to work very hard to reach their targets. So I think the training piece is missing, and people should look at how do we train them better and how do we continue to train them to ensure that that talent is.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Smriti, for the chairing this session, and all the other panelists. Can we have a round of applause, please? This panel concludes the summit of the Apex 13 event, and we'll have a short break, before which we'll have our special guests arriving for the evening awards function, and it's scheduled to